Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh.
And Reg.
And we're grateful to be back on with you yet again. It's your boys are coming in virtual for you homies. I am in America and doing my thing. I've abandoned ship of Canada, living my life. But no, we're just here on vacation for the next couple of weeks. And obviously, it's always a grand old time being down here. Beach culture is always hilarious. It's always fun. And just live my life.
Beach
We're got a lot to get into today.
Aren't you in Maine though?
Yeah.
Oh,
heavy beach culture here.
Okay, cool.
That's what New England's known for. Southern Maine, along the coast of Massachusetts, heavy beach culture on the coast here.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. I was thinking like North Carolina maybe, but Maine.
Nah,
they're a glorified New Brunswick.
No, bro. No, I mean maybe northern Maine definitely. So like anything north of like Portland for sure.
Yeah.
But no, here. Have you ever watched The Summer I Turned Pretty on Amazon Prime?
I haven't, but this is the second time you've mentioned it. So now I'm
Dude,
like, oh man,
it's a dope show, bro. Dope show, but yeah, it's based on like it's based out of like New England. So
okay, cool.
And beach culture, and she was in high school, and she went to her cottage on the coast for her very last summer, and that's when she turned pretty. So that's what it's about. It's actually I have no idea. I have a soft spot for it. Couldn't tell you why, but that's that. But the big thing that came out, a couple things we're going to be talking about. Obviously, we're going to talk about different housing issues that's going on. You were getting an earful from different segments of your friend groups that you want to touch on today.
Yeah.
But the big story, I'd say the big story, but a fun highlight to chat about is the Nova Scotia housing minister calling on residents to offer up their spare rooms using a product called Happy Pad, where they connect people who want to offer up their rooms and people who are looking to rent. And that was one of the solutions they're offering in terms of the housing crisis we're currently experiencing, because we can't seem to build houses fast enough.
Yeah, and it was funny because one of my friends actually from Alberta, he sent this to me and he's like, do you guys not have, that application that you can just put like rooms on and rent? And I was like, yeah, we have that. I'm trying to think of it right now. It's escaping my mind for I don't know why, but what is that called again? When you're trying to like rent a place, you look a cottage up on this thing.
It's like Airbnb.
Airbnb, thank you.
Oh shoot, sorry.
Yeah. He's like, do you not have Airbnb down there? And I'm like, yeah, we have Airbnb. He's like, is this not just like the government basically buying another Airbnb? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and didn't you guys just have all this regulation going in against Airbnb? I'm like, yeah, we did. He's like, okay, cool. Just checking. And I'm like, yeah, and I said to him, and it's kind of what I think too. It's like the government's just like throwing any kind of idea out there to see if they can get something to work. And I don't think this is a good one. I think that they're just trying it. But honestly, it's one of those things where I'm like, man, the thing that we need to do is we need to speed up the development process and the development approval process. Just start, green lighting things that have been red lit for a while now, and just start building them. And I think that's going to be something that would be a real boon to our economy too. And it's just something that we just need to get on board with. I don't know if I spoke to this last time or if this was just something I had a conversation with friends, because I've been talking a lot about housing recently, but just the idea that there's so many layers of committees and people wanting to have a say in every aspect of a development that it's cumbersome. So you have like a heritage advisory committee, you have a design review committee, you have a community advisory committee, you've got like committees on committees. And if any person in any of this process, doesn't like the way that shutter looks, or thinks that the overhang is just a little too much, like these types of things, it then has to go back and get a study done, or it has, like, it's crazy. And then the other problem too is that, and I can say this because I sat on the community design advisory committee for Halifax, so I was in the weeds of it for a while. And then the other problem too is just like the way that developments are going in, like development approval process. Things that are kind of huge and require like a detailed eye are stuck in the queue with everything else that could be just a quick check mark and off to the races. I knew somebody who had a spare piece of property that they were going to develop some rental units on, and they waited 2 years to get approvals to get like just some 2-story rentals. They're nothing like crazy. It's nothing, obtrusive, but yeah, because they were stuck behind everybody else, right? And so they need some kind of streamlining process to actually get this moving and to get those quick check marks like just off into the races. Because it's, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, from your experience, how much of this is provincial, how much of it is federal, and how much of it is municipal?
Mostly municipal, definitely. My only experience is with the municipal government right now. One of the things that really irked the municipal government, though, is that the provincial government would walk in and just greenlight things. Because basically what would happen is you'd get a developer that was like, I want to build 1,000 units. And the city's like, oh, well, we want to study this, look at it, do our due diligence, which like a certain degree of that is like warranted and required. And the province walked in and said, we need houses now, and just like pushed it forward. And so that really soured relationships between the provincial government and the municipal government, because the way that our system works right now, the provincial government supersedes any rules and laws that the municipal government works on. So if the municipal government says no, a developer could actually go to the provincial government, and the provincial government can say yes, and then it gets approved. So it's kind of like where the buck stops is at the provincial. But
and I remember the big development site that really happened at was up kind of the Dartmouth side there, over in Woodside. I believe that's where a lot of the drama happened between provincial and municipal.
There's a couple.
Summer.
There's a couple.
Okay.
So there's one up it's like McCabe Lake Way. So it's an area that's for people who aren't familiar with Halifax geography, it's an area that's kind of a little more rural. So they're building a subdivision up there, and that got greenlit. And so there was a lot of people that were upset that that there was no environmental assessment done for that. And then there's a spot up by, like Josh had said, in Dartmouth, and that's an area that that has a lot of like wetlands and a lot of it's like a corridor for wildlife, and so people were really upset with that. And then the other problem with that one in particular that people were really freaking out about is that the amount of units, the amount of homes that they're going to build in that area is going to put a lot of pressure on transit and people commuting. And so that was where people were really upset. And I can get it. I do understand where you're like, okay, this is going to be really disruptive. But at the same time, it's like you're sitting in a pretty privileged spot to be in your single family home going, I don't want somebody to build another home. Like that's kind of unfair. But like I said, I get the idea that things are going to be a little bit rough in the interim. I can totally empathize with not wanting machinery in my backyard or more traffic to have to deal with, but at the same time, people need places to live.
Totally. Yeah, that was one of the stories of the last place I lived at. Our neighbor was a huge forefront of people protesting the developments on those wetlands. And she was one of the ones that I think got hit by a bulldozer, almost got hit by a bulldozer, something like that. And she's fine. She's all good. But that was a lot of drama last.
How was the bulldozer
summer? Yeah, that's a good question. We have to ask the feelings of the bulldozer. I think it's day to day with hurt feelings.
Yeah.
But it was, I remember just feeling like I get where like people are coming from in terms of, yeah, we like don't want to disturb wildlife. But at the same time, we need to get houses built. So where's that kind of that give and take between the people and the government and us, how housing people essentially.
It's like you and I have said before, like everything is a trade-off, and it's what is the trade-off that you're willing to live with, because you know, with energy, with housing, with you know, paying for things out of the provincial budget, like everything is a give and a take, and it's a trade-off, and it's like what is the thing that you're willing to live with, because nothing's going to be a perfect solution. And so in this case, maybe it's, you know, this wetland is destroyed, but they use, you know, funding from the developer, because they collect money from the developer when they do things like this, to then remediate another spot in the province and restore a wetland. Or I know that there's a lot of area around where that development is happening that there used to be historic gold mining, and so there's tailings ponds and historic areas that need remediation from this gold mining process. That maybe that could be money could go to that to remediate that and turn that into active wetland and restore something that's been destroyed. There's always solutions around things, but yeah, I just find that people are quick to go to say, I don't like this, and get in that NIMBYism where it's, you know, if it was somewhere else, it would be totally fine. But because it's near me, then I'm gonna squawk. But yeah. And one of the other things too, I was talking to a friend about was just like the fact that we just need to get these houses built, because an app to find spare rooms like that, yeah, that seems like a shot in the dark. Like if it houses people, then I get it. But I think it was 1.3 million, was it, that they dropped on that? Was that the figure?
1.3.
1.3? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In the grand scheme of like the housing budget, 1.3 million is not a huge amount. But definitely for shelters and things like that, 1.3 million could have really helped. But yeah, well, it remains to be seen. But again, I think that, yeah, we're pushing hard against things like Airbnb, but we've just created a provincial one. So
Yeah, well, we didn't even create it. That's the confusion I have. Is Happy Pad is a private entity
yeah.
that the government's leveraging. So I'm just trying. I don't understand the difference. That's where I'm getting confused. I'm looking at the website. They love where you live. Rent spare rooms by the month from verified hosts. Like it's identical to Airbnb.
Yeah.
What I'm curious of is who owns this. That's
Mm-hmm.
I want to start following the dollars on this. I want to look into this because this is where I am a little, as you said, confused because we just introduced a bunch of legislation against people who own Airbnbs or Airbnb in general, but then we just started putting a bunch of money into Happy Pad, who is getting, who works with CMHC, works with Lambton College, Selkirk College, like all kinds of different organizations across the country. They're based out of Kelowna.
Oh, interesting.
So is this Airbnb is not a Canadian entity? We want to support local Canadian business. Is that one of these moves? I'd be curious.
Yeah. It,
You know what?
well,
Let's go.
remains to be seen, right?
We're gonna do some research for the homies on this one because I'm genuinely interested. And if I want to follow the dollar on this one because this one seems weird to me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, like, what the $1.3 million is actually being spent on. I know that they're talking about this app being used to just like resolve disputes. That was one of the things that I thought that was interesting, because I was like, we have a rental tenancy board that does that.
Mm-hmm.
So why would we introduce like third party dispute resolution? So I thought that was interesting when I read that. But yeah, I'm just curious to know like what exactly we're spending the 1.3 million on in this app. But because like you said, it's already been developed. So
Exactly. That's where we there's a lack of transparency on it, and that's where I'm getting concerned. And it's just they kind of came out, said they're dropping 1.3. You should use it. Open up your house, or you open up your room for people who are unhoused, and they left it at that.
yeah.
So,
And the other part of it too that I'm wondering, like, they're looking at this as more than just an Airbnb kind of situation. They're looking at this as like month to month rentals. And I'm just thinking, like, if you're opening up a room, you're essentially like taking on a roommate. Like, you're not you're not creating a separate space with a separate kitchen, separate living space. Like this is like, and if the person is unhoused already, like there might be a whole host of other needs that this individual might have. That might be reading too far into it, but it just, yeah, it feels like like I said, like a shot in the dark, throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to see what sticks, trying to like try anything, right? Which on one hand I do appreciate, because I feel like sometimes governments can be too cautious and they don't try anything. But on the other hand, I can definitely say that we want to see smart moves, smart experiments, and trying things that feel like they make sense to try.
Right. Well, I'll put this bio of the CEO I'm coming across on LinkedIn. His name is Kalen Libby, and this is his about. It says founder and CEO at happypad.com and refugeehousing.ca, leading Canada's transition towards a shared housing economy to unlock hidden housing supply. I love to solve difficult problems that benefit society. HappyPad is the embodiment of my vision to address housing challenges and social inclusion and creating more sustainable cities. We do this by empowering people to connect with compatible housing companions, creating vibrant and rewarding home environments.
So I wonder if this is like kind of based off the idea like we saw in like a Norwegian model where students were paired up with older folks who had space in their homes, and then they were able to actually like um, rent a space in that home and help the older adult that was there, like with groceries, cleaning, stuff like that. And it actually turned out to be like a really good fit. So I wonder if this is kind of that same like method of thinking, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I hope it creates people or creates spaces for people to live so that we have less housing issues. But it's not a long term solution to me. It's just this is a band aid, and
Right. So reading through it a little more, or at least the people's reactions to it, a lot of people are kind of connecting this situation of like, the government asking people to open up their homes to the question that came up on the census, last year, 2 years ago. I don't know if you saw this.
no, I didn't.
So one of the questions on the census was they're asking how many spare bedrooms do you have, which I remember seeing that question myself and found it a little odd. I didn't know what to really think of it, but you answer it, and so now people are now getting paranoid, as they would, because it's like, oh, now they know how many spare bedrooms have. Is this a gateway to them forcing us to open up our homes to house people? That's where people are at, and that's where, or at least some people are at, and they're concerned with. What's your response to that?
My response, I think that's I do think that's a little bit conspiracy theorist. I don't think there's any way you could force somebody to live with you, even if you had a spare bedroom. I think that one of the things it does tell you, though, um, when you look at over time the fact that we have more single people living in apartments or homes or things like that, like we have a lot less coupling happening than we did in previous generations. And so before you'd have like, your mother, your father, and two kids and a dog, like kind of thing. Like that was your nuclear family, and they occupied a certain amount of rooms. Whereas now, you have more single people living in 2-bedroom apartments because they need 1 bedroom for an office, for remote work, or just because, like even before remote work was a huge thing, just wanting that extra space. And so I think that what they're looking at is the fact that the culture of how we live has changed, and just the fact that like there's more people living singly, and occupying more space than what we have in the past, and what that might be doing to our housing supply as well. But also, I also think that it's these are kind of like interesting things to look at, but I think the real problem is just the fact that like our immigration is just out of touch with the fact that we just don't have spaces to house people. And I think that, I don't know if you and I were talking about this earlier this week, or if I've had so many conversations this week on housing, but yeah, just this older lady, and she was like, listen, like my parents were immigrants, and I'm not against immigration. She's like, but when these immigrants come here, she's like, they've got no homes, no doctors, no jobs. She's like, what are we offering them? She's like, we're just creating a problem. She's like, when my parents immigrated, she's like, they came, they had a house, they had a family doctor, they had a job. And she's like, so it made sense. She's like, right now, she's like, it doesn't make sense. And I saw like the media trying to like paint her as being like the crotchety old lady and what a hypocrite, you know, she's anti-immigration, she's the daughter of immigrants herself. And, you know, and it was just like, no, this lady is actually making a point. It's like, we need to do smart immigration, not just like open the floodgates and then, you know, watch everything fall into chaos. Because that's kind of what's happening. So
Yeah, I mean, so we're seeing what's happening in Toronto, where these refugees on the streets right now in tents with no place to go. That's happening currently. Olivia Chow just got ridiculed the same way that the housing minister in Nova Scotia got ridiculed for saying everyone needs just to open up their homes for these people. And here we are because we have out of control immigration from your boy Sean Fraser, and we're getting stuck. We as a society ourselves, we're facing walls where we can't get doctors, we can't get housing, we're having struggles meeting our basic needs, and we're going to keep introducing new people to this. That's an issue. That's a problem. And you flag it as a problem, the government will make sure you're silenced and make sure you're labeled as a racist, or as prejudice, or as whatever they want to throw at you to make sure you stay quiet and no one takes you seriously. So that's where on this issue, what you're seeing in Toronto, where they're flooding the streets with new immigrants with nowhere to go. This was one of the things, as a side note, this is one of the things they asked to make sure was a condition that was satisfied when Kelsey, my wife, was immigrating to Canada, is that she had a place to live. Someone was going to be here to take care of her. She was financially going to be okay and wasn't going to be relying on the system. That was a condition on her being able to start the immigration process. But now we're just bringing everybody all in. So you have to see the issue with the refugees in Toronto, and then you see that what the Nova Scotia housing minister is saying. I don't think it's totally out of touch to say maybe could we be seeing a purpose-led focus on overwhelming our systems to the fact that people have to start, bubbling up in these homes.
Yeah, I don't know if it's purposeful. I think I've said this before, that I think it's just a lazy way to try and get more tax dollars, is that you add more bodies. It creates, when you add more population to an area, then there's going to be more services required. So therefore, businesses are going to be created to service those needs. So it is a good economic strategy to immigrate people into an area, especially if the area is like a rural area where it might be economically depressed or people might be leaving. So it makes sense there. But the problem is that if the supports aren't in place, if you can't build houses fast enough, if there isn't enough infrastructure, like actual infrastructure for these people to then thrive, then you're straining the system more. And that's kind of where I've landed, where I just think that like maybe we need to like pause immigration just for a couple of years while we let our housing catch up. Because I think that's the biggest problem right now, is that like we're putting the cart before the horse, where we're trying to get people and get the economy rolling. Or I guess we're not trying to get the economy rolling if you're the federal government. You're actively trying to tank it. But local governments and communities are actively trying to bolster their economies. And so I think that for this reason, I think that maybe it's one of those things that you look at, like maybe we need to pause immigration until we get our housing stock to a point where we're not subjecting people to living on the streets. And I know there's going to be a lot of people like that are going to hate that, because they're going to say, well, people are trying to flee a war-torn country. But it's like, dude, what do you do? Like, you know what I mean? You're fleeing a war-torn country and to come live in the streets in a different one. So yeah, it's not making it better. But
Well, that's why I kind of go back to a comment you made a couple of weeks ago, where you saw what was happening from an economic perspective in an economy, and you made the bold statement that you think it's being done on purpose. So my question then to you is, why don't you think the overwhelming immigration is not being done on purpose? Like we all can clearly see that bringing in more immigration to a system that's already overwhelmed is not a smart idea. But
Hmm.
you're suggesting that it's just mainly out of incompetence that it's happening versus it being on purpose.
I think it's kind of almost like the budget will balance itself kind of a thought, like where it's like, oh, if we bring in more people, especially if they've got skilled trades or if they've got, um, foreign money or skills or things that they can bring to enrich our communities, then it's going to be a net positive. It's all going to work out in the wash at the end, and I think that's really the mindset of people. And then it's also like I said, the humanitarian side where people are like, well, we can't just leave people to die in a war zone. And like, yeah, I get that. So I think that there's two things happening there where it's like we want to do the right thing and help people who need to be helped. But at the same time, we're also thinking, okay, well, maybe these people are gonna, become general laborers, become skilled trades workers that are gonna like help out with different aspects of our economy. So, you know, because you see a lot of these individuals like that they immigrate, especially into like rural communities, end up like working on farms and picking berries, vegetables, and things that like that they're having a hard time getting like born and raised Canadians to actually do. So like the agricultural community, they love immigration because they're looking at it like, okay, this is a labor force that we can use. But so I think that those are all things that are probably playing into this. I don't think it's like we're trying to crash the system using immigration. I think it's just like people are seeing, like I said, the potential benefits, and then they're also that's that humanitarian element too. That's I don't know, pushing it that way. But what are you thinking? I'm seeing you smiling and laughing over there. What are you thinking?
Well, let's go. First thing that came to mind was when you're talking about the skilled laborers and all that stuff. It reminded me of a lot of what's happening down south of the border in the States, where we see one party who is like, let everyone come over,
Mm-hmm.
because the big money that supports that party gets to benefit from all the cheap labor that comes across the
Yeah.
border. Uh, so that's what made me laugh. I'm like, it looks like we're probably trying to do something similar here in Canada. Just get all the people who aren't from here, just get them working, doing the jobs that no one else wants to do,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how that works. But the other thing that comes to mind as well is I'm seeing this whole open borders policy taking place in almost every NATO nation.
Mm-hmm.
Happening in Canada, state America. It's happening in various countries in Europe, who they're taking on a lot of the Syrian refugees. Came into a lot of the different Western countries over in Europe, and they continue to take on more refugees or more like heavy immigration, to the point where I'm seeing other countries where it's becoming a same. They're having the same problems that we're having,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen interviews, whether it be with Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, who said that this stuff was going to happen. We were going to start having more mass immigration, more overwhelming of our systems, and makes me wonder. That's why, I know it's not just an us problem. I'm seeing it happen across a lot of the Western nations. Is it being done on purpose? I still have to ask the question, because I think it's interesting. I think you make some great points. That it is just kind of like, oh, maybe it's just Sean Fraser not really knowing what he's doing, or just as you said, the mentality of the budget will balance itself. They're just hopefully we'll just bring all these people in, it'll all work itself out at the end. I'm not opposed to that either, but I also would be remiss to ignore all these other things I'm seeing around the globe as well. So
Mm-hmm. I wonder though, like my question is like, what is happening in some of these other areas too, where like the refugees are coming from? Like, I know that we keep seeing all these tragic images coming out of the Mediterranean. I think the most recent thing that I saw was a I don't know what kind of tanker it was, but there were literally people like on the rudder of this ship that they had been on the rudder of the ship for 10 days and they had run out of food and water at day 6 or something like that. So they had to like try and survive off of seawater, and probably other liquids too that they didn't quite mention in the article, but I would imagine. Um, so you like, and this is horrific. It's like nobody is willingly subjecting themselves to this kind of treatment. Like you have to literally be escaping for your life in order to take on that kind of a risk. And like I said, you see the amount of people that pass away in the Mediterranean just trying to escape like North Africa and you know, those regions. And it's just like, why? What is happening? Like surely those areas like why isn't there more done to stabilize those areas so that people don't have to leave, I guess?
It's a great question. You know, I'm starting to see, obviously, I don't know if you saw any of the videos coming out of South Africa and a new political party or politician that's coming out of the woodwork who's starting to galvanize the people, get them fired up. There are a lot of memes coming out about him, and specifically the big stadium that he filled. And that was some worrisome stuff coming out of that. I don't know if you saw those videos.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so from what I was seeing, at least the video, he had people chanting "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," which is concerning. And so you kind of look into the bit of the history in South Africa. That was kind of happened, I think, back in the 70s. I could be wrong, 80s, where a lot of people just kind of came in and like just took over the farms and kind of kicked people out and took over the means of production for food. And I think that's kind of what they were referring to as taking back control of what was stolen from them way back then. And but there's some who translate Boer as it just means farmer. There's others that mean that they just are targeting white farmers. So there's a lot of it and a lot of tension coming out of South Africa in terms of some messaging that's coming out of a politician down there, and that does impact at least the BRICS nations in a big way, which is very interesting to me. That's something that really kind of came to mind there. And obviously people in the West, specifically in the US, are seeing that and they're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And don't get me wrong, I think it is crazy. If the translation is true, it's, apartheid come back all over again. Surprise, surprise. But like, where does that leave that country? If someone like that comes to power and violence is encouraged against people who provide the food for the nation, where does that leave them?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
I certainly wouldn't want to be tackling I wouldn't say tackling, but wouldn't want to be, I don't want to say POing. I'm trying to be somewhat professional when we're talking here, like angering. There we go. We don't want to be angering our farmers and the people who are providing food, especially when you have to look at the fact that the breadbasket of Europe there is currently fighting a war. So food is kind of not going to be something that you want to disrupt at this point in time. And especially with different things happening in our weather and affecting just how we produce food right now as it is. So
totally. But yeah, it's I'm starting to see it in many countries. Like there's just so much tension in politics in various amount of countries around the world.
Yeah.
I just don't know where that leaves us aside from like the inevitable. It is worrisome.
It is. It's weird because like I feel like it's something it's bubbling under the surface, and I don't think media is helping at all. I think media is polarizing people because they can sell polarizing articles. And I think I do blame media. I think that media is actively profiteering off of people's disenfranchisement and off their division. So I think that's what's happening. That's my hot take on that. And I blame the media and I hold them accountable for this because the bias that we're seeing in things is it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's fair. It's I my favorite part about at least the media in our country. I can't really speak so much. I could probably speak for CNN too, and other media in the states, but I did find it very. Uh, I mean, it's an interesting strategy, right? Where you create a lot of the emotions and division in a country, and then when the finger comes pointed back at you, they say, whoa, we don't want to attack journalists here. Like, journalism's how our democracy is built. you
Yeah.
know Classic move. Start just poking the bear, then the bear reacts like, oh, I didn't do anything. That's your problem. So yeah.
Yeah, it kind of like this is a little throwback to when Reg was young. So I have three younger siblings, and it's kind of like what I used to do with my younger siblings. Like I was the oldest out of four, and you would stoke the coals a bit and cause a conflict
Nice.
between the two younger siblings. The youngest guy was like way, way, way younger to even be affected by this, but the other two in the middle, like I'd stir crap and cause them to fight, and then you'd sit back and watch it happen. And then when mom and dad would come in and be like, "What's going on?" It would be like, "Oh, well, they were fighting," and then you sit back and you watch the chaos that you created. And I don't think it's actually that far from what's happening, like with our countries and with the media right now. I think it's exactly what you said. The media is stoking the fire, creating division, profiting off of it, and then when like you said, when the finger is pointed back at them, being like, "Hey, you're really biased, and you're being funded way too much by the government, so you're not actually having a neutral opinion." All these things, media just fights back, and this is the end of democracy, which is the thing that they just love to say these days. And
Yeah.
it's working though, which is the annoying part, because I'm having conversations with friends of mine who are like good people, who like are knowledgeable people, well educated people, who are just like, I don't know what you're talking about, Reg. Like CBC is great, and I'm like, the CBC is not doing a good job.
The CBC is so awesome. Why would you say anything negative
Yeah.
about them? They're the only unbiased news source in our country.
Yeah. And it was funny because then I started pulling up different things. I was like, what about this? What about this? And they're like, oh, well, that news source that's criticizing the CBC, they're a garbage news source. I was like, okay. I was like, well, what about this one? They're like, oh no, that one's garbage too. And I was like, well, here's the Toronto Sun. I was like, the Toronto Sun is talking about it right here, and showing examples of like the leaning that the CBC has, and they were just like, yeah, that's cool, but we need to
But
keep the
that's the Toronto
CBC.
Sun.
It was like, what? And then I showed them the graph, the
No,
famed
not
the
oh
famed
no,
graph.
not
And
the
you know
chart.
what? It actually worked.
Of
This one
course,
person in particular,
has
he
to.
was just like, he's like, oh wow, he's like, that's really bad. I was like, see?
And they do this consistently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Eh,
it's hard, right? Because you're trying to have conversations with people, and I guess that's kind of probably where a lot of our listeners are sitting too. It's like, when you want to have an honest conversation with somebody about like what you're seeing in the media, what messages are being like basically forced upon us, and then when you have any kind of conversation like that, they're like, the other person's immediate response is like, "Ooh, you're sounding far right." You're like, "What?" We need to be able to have like unbiased, like open discussions about our media, especially where we actively know now how much it's funded and how much the funding is increased by our current sitting government, and we know how governments around the world like to ingratiate themselves with praise through their media platforms that they pay for. Um, but yeah, to have that conversation, like people are just like looking at you like you're, you know, out to go get your KKK mask or something, like it's or hood or whatever. It's just insane. It's like, come on, people, like you're not a far right person for saying the CBC is biased, but yet that's the narrative that's out there.
were you coming after Hockey Night in Canada next? Is that what you're doing? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's the I have found it perplexing with how the depths that people go to defend the CBC.
Yeah. And like, where did this loyalty come from? I guess that's what I want to know. Like,
Just because it
how did
was
it
the only
become
few
part of
channels I
our?
could get.
Yeah, I was like, how
That's
did
why.
it become part of our um like people defend the CBC like people defend healthcare in this country. It's like a part of our like national identity or something. It's like how did this happen? Like, good for them, good on them, like for marketing, like, but yeah.
I just remember Channel 6, baby. That's where I remember CBC coming up on back when we had channels. Channel 6. And there was always something on there. It wasn't good, but there was always something on.
See, we always had CTV and we had NTV. So
Oh,
NTV
yes.
was the Newfoundland television.
Yeah.
So that was always good. But we never really had CBC. We only had like CBC radio, and it was always like,
Really?
oh yeah. So
Oh, man. No wonder.
we yeah, no wonder I'm in that anti CBC now. But yeah, because like we'd have CBC radio, and it would be like some like very smooth talking individual that would come on the radio, and they'd say, and now we're introducing this artist that you've never heard of and probably never will again. And then they like play something that's like, I don't know, interpretive jazz. And you'd be like, this sucks.
Changing the channel. Gee.
But
Yeah, that's Reg's origin story with how he hated the CBC. And there you go. But I'll
my villain origin story.
seriously. Now he's dedicated, taking it out at all costs. But I'll display this this video I was talking about the South African political party, and I'll just let you watch 27 seconds, see what your thoughts are, and see if anyone is maybe over exaggerating what's happening.
My first thought, I was like, man, I was like, their their political rallies are way more fun than ours. But yeah, and then the other part was like, yeah, that was interesting, especially when he was making the gun noises. I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
so
Elon Musk commented on this post,
yeah.
saying they're openly pushing for genocide of white people in South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa, why do you say nothing? Which I believe is probably a news, some type of journalist person. Oh, it's the president of. There it is. So, yeah, I thought it was chilling watching that personally.
Yeah.
So.
But I don't know. It's
Wouldn't want to be a farmer in South Africa.
nope.
Or white.
Yeah. South Africa is just a place I wouldn't want to be in, honestly. It's just, yeah, I dated a person from South Africa back in my early university days, and she was like, oh yeah, we had like 10-foot fences with barbed wire at the top and glass all embedded in it. I was like, oh, that sounds lovely. Like, no thanks. But,
yeah, I've had numerous friends who are from South Africa, and the stories they could tell of just randomly middle of the night, two guys break into their house, hold guns to their heads as they steal everything, rob them. That's why they live in Canada now.
right.
It's bonkers what goes on and down there, and the crime is so rampant.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a history to all of that and why it is the way it is. But it's just, yeah, definitely not a place I would want to reside personally.
But anyway, jumping back to the media thing though, for one last little thing, I wanted to show you some stuff that came from Jagmeet Singh, and I want you to take kind of a critical eye to this a little bit, because TikTok it's from Red Pill North, so you can kind of get that it's going to be a right wing leaning account. But one of the things that they say on this, they say that Jagmeet Singh, in a disappointing move, has made it clear that he will only entertain questions from the legacy media. This refusal to engage with a diverse range of journalists raises concerns around transparency and accountability. By limiting his interactions to a select few, Singh is effectively shutting down alternative perspectives and limiting potential for robust and fair reporting. So when I read that immediately, I'm like, oh crap, like that's not good. And it's like, okay, so who does he consider legacy media? The problem is that when I did some research, I couldn't find any other kind of like comments about this idea of him only speaking to legacy media outlets. And so yeah, so this is where I'm just like, is this somebody posting something to try and get outrage and get people to click on it or not? And so I will just see if I can bring that up there. So
Elizabeth May told me earlier today, and I think she spoke in the other debate recently, that she wants the Alberta oil sands offline in a decade. What's the date that you want the Alberta oil sands offline? Sorry, what's your name? My name's Keenan with RNN. You're with who? RNN. I'm going to pass on the question. Okay, so do I get the follow up then? Or are you just going to pass on the question for? Yeah, I'm not going to answer this hard one. Or? I'm just not going to answer your question. Okay, so the follow up, I guess, would be how do you have the moral authority to take the Alberta oil sands offline, given Alberta most just recently rejected your party in the largest democratic mandate that the province has ever seen? I'm not going to answer your question. Thanks. Hard one. Thanks, man.
so what are your thoughts on that?
So this is something that both Jagmeet and Trudeau have done, or on the record are doing. They will never engage with rebel media, and that's who, at the time, that's who he was representing.
Yeah.
Since then, that reporter has now gone on to be independent journalist who now runs his own thing called the Counter Signal, and that is you saw the reaction for Jagmeet there at the end, right? He asked where he's from, and he said, "All right, I'm not going to answer the question." So he's clearly targeting specific news outlets based on who they represent, and just it could. I thought it was a fair question, and the fact that he looked like he was going to answer until he's like, maybe I should ask where he's from first.
Yeah.
Like that's. I'm not saying that they're just outright not responding to. I'm not going to cast a huge net saying they're not responding to any independent journalists, because there's probably left-wing independent journalists they'll talk to. I haven't seen them try to talk to any other independent journalist, period. Personally, I haven't seen them entertain those questions. But I don't think it's too far off to say that they're at least Jagmeet and Trudeau are trying to avoid the smaller outlets.
Yeah.
Because they say they don't trust them. Even though Rebel and Trudeau have had it out. It's gone to courts before. Then the courts had granted in Rebel Media's favor to be able to be at the debates during our last election cycle. So that's where I think that stands. I do believe that they try to shy away from it. I think it's definitely helped people like Pierre Poilievre to engage with them. I think it was Pierre who was on I think it was like maybe a 1 hour show, 2 hours. No, it was an hour and a half show with Jordan Peterson, which I thought was an interesting interview. I think Jordan asked a lot of interesting questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh yeah, Justin would never sit down for an hour with somebody unedited.
Yeah.
That just wouldn't happen. Jagmeet wouldn't do that either. So that just tells you, if you're not willing to sit in an unedited session, then are you a strong leader? And do you actually believe in your policies? Or is there something you're hiding? That's the question I have to ask.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing that I have to say that maybe might be in defense of these people is kind of like what we saw with like the Dylan, Dylan Page, is that his name?
Dylan Mulvaney?
No. The TikTok news guy.
Oh, Dylan Page. Yeah.
News Daddy. Where he did sit down for an interview with a regular legacy news outlet, and they just chopped it all to pieces and just made a mess out of it. And he was like, "What the hell?" Do you think that that's probably what what these leaders are expecting, because they're like, okay, this is a conservative leaning news outlet. So therefore, if I walk into this space, they're just going to cut and chop up anything that I say to make it the worst sounding possible.
It's super easy to get around. Just start putting contracts in place. If you really want to show people that you're open, put contracts in place saying it will be truly unedited interview.
Mm-hmm.
And if the outlet reneges on what they signed of the contract, then you can sue them. It's easy. Like, just put contracts in place so that they can't screw with you.
Yeah.
And you as the left-leaning government have all of the institutional power. So you can go after them if they do anything stupid. So what is there to be afraid? You have nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
You can easily take out any of these guys at any point. They've already tried. So why not just sit down for an unedited interview and talk about your ideas and your policies and how they're helping or how they're not helping? Have that, just even an open town hall where even the person asking the questions, it shouldn't be in a debate setting. It should just be them asking questions about their policies and let them answer, period. And release that unedited and let people decide what they think of your policy positions. It's so easy to just do it that way, but they won't, because they know their policies suck. They know they're not helping people, but they want to maintain their power, period.
Mm-hmm. Damn. I was waiting for you to like drop the mic. No, bro, that's too expensive.
Sure, I'm broke these days, bro. I'm broke.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with you, like 100%. Because I think that that's the kind of authenticity that's missing, I think, in a lot of leaders, and I think that that's something that people are hungry for, and that's why I think that you're seeing a lot more individuals kind of like turning to more conservative leaders and more conservative outlets, is just because that's kind of like what their main go-to is. It's that unedited, unfiltered, unpolished, and here it is, take me as I am kind of thing, for better or for worse in some cases. But it is one way to actually like, okay, to know what you're getting, or at least have an idea of what you're getting. But
Absolutely. And what I've been seeing on social media. So you have to take this with a grain of salt, because these could all be bots for all I know. But what I read in the comments, I do like to take kind of a temperature of where people are at on specific issues, and then I also like, depends on the account too, right? So some more left-leaning accounts are going to have more left-leaning commentary on the post, versus more right-leaning accounts are going to have more right-leaning commentary on the posts. But overall, kind of gauging where people on the left are with, how the concern that's being raised is that, oh, wow, our country's becoming more conservative. Populism is rising. This is a threat to our democracy. And it is very insulting to me as just a human being to read that, because it's not that populism rising. Sure, maybe it is. Maybe conservatism is rising. Maybe. But then, if that's the truth, if maybe it is rising, then you have to ask yourself, why? Oh, it's because your left-wing ideas, for right now, the way it's being executed, suck. They don't work, or the way they're being implemented aren't working. I don't think all left-wing ideas are bad. I think there's some great ones, but they also have to be followed with execution, and the execution is not there. Thus, people are looking for another variation, another way to solve these problems that we're faced with. So yes, sure, conservatism is rising because the solution that they're being offered isn't working. So,
and then you have to wonder, like, also too, if we're a democracy does go by the will of the people and the will of the majority. And if the will of the majority is, a conservative ideology, then that's kind of the way that, a democracy functions, where that's the way it goes. And then in a couple of years' time, if democracy, sees people moving towards more of a liberal idea, then that's the way that it moves as well. And things ebb and flow and move over time. And that's how society moves forward. And I think that's also kind of a bit of experimentation, where people like like, okay, we tried this way and these are the outcomes and we're not really crazy about that, so we're going to try this other way. But I do hear you, especially when people are just like, oh yeah, this is like, it's the end of the world. Like, people think that like the sky is going to come crashing down on them and that we're going to turn into, I don't know, some, dystopian future where everybody is, I don't know, back in the 1950s again. You know what I mean? It's just, and that's never going to happen. But yeah, it's interesting. And so I guess my question for you then is just like, as an individual, like thinking, especially of the listeners too, just like, what do you do to make sure that the news that you're consuming is balanced and that you're getting a good mix of both?
Twitter, or X in this case, is what I consume a lot of. My whole timeline is just following different independent journalists, whether they be on the left or the right. That's why I know who Rachel Gilmore is. Some of her posts drive me up the wall, but I need to be. I want to know what she's saying. I'm curious what the conversations she's trying to get going, because I want to know what I'm talking about. I don't want to live in a. Obviously, yes, I lean more right wing, at least at this point in my life. I don't think I'm doing myself any favors by being in a right wing echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for maybe about a year after I realized how much like the CTVs, the CBCs, the global CNNs of the world that I trusted so much growing up are lying to me. I did go into that echo chamber for about a year during about 2020 for sure, because I just rejected all of it because I was so frustrated after being lied to for so long. But then I slowly started, adding them back to my Twitter timeline, and but then I also listen, watch, and consume a lot of right leaning, journalists, and just kind of take into account what they're saying. And what I do is anything they're posting, and right wing journalists are, as in some cases, are just as bad for this as left wing is. They tend to post sensational headlines at times or sensational images, and you have to do your due diligence to figure out what's actually happening, what's actually going wrong. When I first saw that, the tweet that I shared with you guys earlier tonight, I had to like go into like, okay, what is like, there's no context where this is a good thing, where someone says kill anything, it's not good. But I am curious of what the backstory is of what's happening here and why has had this person get 20,000 people plus fired up to like chant that with them.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are really interesting. So I find Twitter's a great anchor, or at least seed to be able to see what's going on and then going in deeper from there. Dylan Page on TikTok is really helpful for me too, in just terms of like just the general news stories are intriguing to me. But I really do my best to really follow, and like, because all the journalists you find on TikTok, you can start with a 2 or 3, but they all follow different people and they follow people, and that's how I kind of create my circle of news online. So, and then I still follow the traditional outlets just to make sure I know what they're saying and
Mm-hmm.
keeping an eye on what's going on. So,
Yeah, that's pretty similar to what I do, honestly. Is like I have some more right leaning media, and because I consider myself more left of center, where you're more right of center, and so I consumed for most of my life in the echo chamber, like more left wing media, and then just like I think in the past couple of years when I've been kind of going, oh, that doesn't make sense. I think what really sparked a lot of it was around COVID, right? It was just like, I've worked in a hospital. I I work with professionals who are healthcare professionals, and some of the things I was just like, that seems a little bit outlandish, and so and so there was like some things I agreed with, some things I didn't, but it was just kind of this idea that you had to accept everything or nothing, and I really hate that kind of dichotomous way of looking at things, the all or nothing argument, and so I never fit into that. And so what it ended up leading me to do was actually add more right leaning journalists to my Instagram. Actually, is what I was using mostly, and because I find Twitter sometimes can just be a hornet's nest of garbage. So I don't use Twitter quite the way that you do, but I use more TikTok and Instagram and follow people there. and sometimes LinkedIn even. LinkedIn will post different things, but yeah. And then I found it was just interesting because then my Google and advertising was just all screwed up because it was like, I don't know if you want this Ford F-150 or if you want to wave a pride flag. So it's like, we're going to show you both because we don't know. And I kind of like that.
Amazing.
I kind of like that because I'm like, yeah, don't put me in your echo chamber and don't advertise all to me, one thing. I want to see it all and then make my decision from there. And I think that's kind of the way that you have to be, whether you're left or right leaning. You have to consume everything because both sides are going to spin it however they want to spin it. Just the same way with that Jagmeet article where I was just like, I looked at it and at first glance it was like, this is garbage. I was like, you should be answering everybody. You're a paid official. You know, you're paid by our tax dollars. The one thing you can do is answer questions.
By the CBC. So yeah, of course they can.
Yeah, but to anybody was my
Right.
thought. Yeah. But then at the same time, like the comment of he's only going to entertain questions from legacy media. It's like I don't see where he said that. He's definitely cherry picking, but like so. Even reading that, where it's like, yes, you can see that the issue he's cherry picking information, but maybe it's not that he's only accepting legacy media. We don't know. That's just something that this person is like pulled from somewhere and included in this comment. And now people are like taking that as gospel truth, right? So it really is about that balance of like, seeing something, having feeling your initial reaction, and then taking a second to go, okay, what in this is like true, what is a part of this that might not actually be supported and might be somebody's opinion, and going from there. But I think there's a lot of value to actually having that shock and awe first, and then sitting with that and saying, okay, I feel that, I see that, now what's next? Like, what part of this is actually useful for me?
Absolutely. These are great points, man, and I'd be interested to see what people are consuming, what news outlets they read on a consistent basis, and to stay informed. The one thing I think that is sort of concerning to me, because I've heard this from multiple listeners at this point, that we are their news source. So that's weird. I don't know how to take that, but I'm grateful. Thank you. It helps me actually. Hearing that actually keeps me honest to make sure I don't go way off the deep end when I'm trying to be, hyperbolic. But we do take that seriously and try to give you as best of a well-rounded perspective as we can.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you got right of center over there and left of center over here, so that you can get a little bit of both. And you know what,
baby,
we're friends, and you can still be friends if you have different opinions. So don't cut
people. Speak for yourself.
Don't cut people out of your life.
Sure. Great point. Speaking of cutting people out of your life, though, we'll end on this story.
Okay.
So made it down to Maine on a slow leaky tire. Rough times.
Mm-hmm.
I get here. It's like start off at about 45 psi, which is where it should be. By the time we got to New Brunswick, it was down to like 34 psi. I was like, oh, that's odd. So I put it back up, and we got here just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I woke up the next morning, and it was like down to 20 psi. I was like, oh, we got a flat tire now. Great. So I'm in like, beach town, Maine. There's really nowhere here that takes care of Teslas. And, but it's just a tire, right? But the issue is the hoists. If you don't have the right, hoists to get a Tesla up, you're going to damage the battery underneath the car.
Right.
So I'm going around from garage to garage, seeing who's got experience dealing with Teslas. And no one does. It's like, oh, look at your tire. I'm like, I know you will look at my tire, and I want you to look at my tire, but you have to get this car up, and I don't feel comfortable with you handling this car. And so, but it's been interesting going to every body shop here, because it's all these garages that are off the dirt road, who are just like two guys and their cousin or whatever, right? And I went to one where it was like you kind of had to go on this dirt road off the main highway, and you ran for probably 3 or 4 kilometers, and then you kind of hit this house. But like every kind of few meters, you see an American flag here, American flag there. Gadsden flag is the one that's flying the highest out of all of them. You're just like, oh baby, we're in we're in that kind of town, baby. Here we go. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna turn around and not risk my life, because here they can shoot on sight and not ask any questions. So this is a castle doctrine state. So I'm gonna just not continue down this path because I don't want to get shot today. So yeah.
Yeah, isn't that wild though? Like
Mhm.
I was just having this conversation last night with an American. He's just like, yeah, and like I want to get my concealed carry so that way, like, you know, the bad guys don't know that I've got it on me, that I'm packing heat. I'm like, what kind of world are you living in that like that like there's just bad guys that have like popping around every corner that you just need to like whip out your concealed handgun? Like,
Yeah,
what?
baby.
No thanks.
God bless America, baby. Let's go.
So if this podcast becomes only a one host kind of thing, we know what happened to Josh.
Yeah. I was just trying to find someone to fix my tire and got shot in the process.
Yeah. That liberal with his Tesla.
Yeah. Oh, GG. So, but it's been a good show. You brought a lot to the show today, Reg, and I appreciate it. Got us all thinking, and that's something we all appreciate. Is there any last words before we close off for the night?
No, man, I just think that you have to try and do your best to consume media from everywhere. I think that's just the thing that hits home. And also like recognizing that media is a business and that they're going to throw the most clickbaity, you know, catchphrasey thing that they can put out there to draw your attention to it. And so, like you said before the show, that you kind of took a little bit of a break this week from social media to kind of decompress. I think we all need to do that every once in a while. And yeah, just give yourself a break, even if you do fall for some of these titles and, you know, you take some of these words as gospel truth. They do that on purpose. It's not your fault. Just, you know, recognize it, move on, and try to do better in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. So whatever it is you're doing, whether you be taking a walk by the beach,
trying to not get shot in America,
or just trying to repair a flat tire that you had on the side of the road, whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, we love you. We're out. Peace.